Welcome to Blessed Be the Breakdown, the podcast where I go over the Testaments episode by episode. Today we're going over episode 9, Marasad, and it is actually named after a famous play about psychological pressure and chaos. So I feel like that's very fitting. Let's get into it. This was a very short episode, but it was full of so much, just like the last one was. Right off the bat, we see the Pearl girls cleaning up what seems to be blood, or I guess they had just done some sort of, what do they call it, a salvaging? Somebody got punished, or something happened to somebody, because they go over the whole spiel of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which I thought was very fitting for Dr. Grove. Just as I suspected last episode, Daisy ends up ringing the bell. And I guess that was what kind of pushed her over the edge, like she needed to get revenge, and she already felt like that before in the last episode. So she rings the bell, and everybody is so shocked because apparently, which we find out later when she goes to the dentist, and there's kind of undertones, and I think we've kind of known this, but I guess Pearl girls don't really end up going through menstruation, so it's not something that happens very often. So the fact that this happened to Daisy was actually quite a miracle, I guess, for them. We also find out, though, that Daisy, of course, won't be eligible for marriage until next marriage season, so she's going to have some time to hopefully escape before that happens. We get to see Daisy plumbing up, as they call it, and Becca actually gives her green pin, and of course she pokes her, and she claims it was an accident, but obviously she did it on purpose. Like, that was not an accident, so there's still very much contention there, as, you know, she just is so mad that Daisy has stepped in and taken on Agnes as a friend. That was Becca's best friend. And so that's just typical teenagers being teenagers and jealousy of friendships. There was a point where Becca actually warned Agnes about Daisy, and for a second there, I thought she was going to tell her that she was like a spy for Mayday. But then she says she's a spy for Aunt Lydia, and I was like, oh, my heart dropped a little bit at that point in time. But thankfully she didn't, and she just thinks she's a spy for Aunt Lydia. It is also during this scene that Daisy finds out that she is going to the dentist straight away. They did not give her no time. Like, she literally just rang that bell and they're like, hey, let's get you to the dentist, girl, because they need to check her teeth. And so she's kind of like, I mean, she knows she wants to do something, but I don't think she's had enough time to plan out what she's going to do. So this is very spur of the moment for her. Agnes, knowing the conversation that they had at the engagement party, tells Daisy or Aunt Estee that she should go with Daisy because Daisy has no family. So she gets to go with her for moral support. We see their little pinky swear, and they're getting closer and closer, which is great because they're getting that bond that we would have gotten through Nicole had Daisy been Nicole. But as we know, she's not. So they're slowly building that bond between these two girls, and it's really nice to see. And then, just as I predicted before, Daisy goes to the dentist, sees Dr. Grove, and he surprisingly ends up not doing anything to her, which gratefully she didn't have to go through that. So she ends up faking the essay, and she runs out, and she lets the guards there know, and they end up arresting him. Now, I kind of knew this was going to happen before, just from the way we ended the last episode and from what happens in the book. As I said in the book, Aunt Elizabeth actually is the one that does the fake essay or fake grape in the book, and Daisy just took her place. And she wasn't in cahoots with Aunt Lydia, so I was a little off there, but it still was the same sentiment. Daisy took that place of Aunt Elizabeth, and now she is the one bringing Dr. Grove down. A little bit after, we get this moment where Daisy is in front of Aunt Vidala, Aunt Lydia, and Aunt Estee, and they're just kind of grilling her because I think they think, things aren't adding up. Or maybe not everybody does, but Aunt Lydia definitely does not think things are adding up. So Aunt Vidala is kind of like trying to push Daisy like she pushed Hilda, where she's like, maybe, this didn't happen, blah, 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 like trying to get her to think she's making it up. And Daisy's like, no, I'm from the Canadian streets over here, okay? I know what the difference between, sexual harassment or assault and not. So she kind of pushes strong. She holds her ground, as Daisy should. Has a little bit of June in her, even though she's not related to June. But she pushes through. Eventually, as we see, Aunt Lydia kind of sends Aunt Vidala and Aunt Estee out of the room, and she has a one-on-one talk with Daisy, and she's kind of like, hey, I know you're bullshitting. Like, you really think that if he was going to assault you, he would have tore your clothes and done all of this? like he wouldn't have made it that obvious, which is true. But I think most people or other people in Gilead probably didn't make those connections. Aunt Lydia's kind of like, he's a bad person. This needed to happen and it was probably going to happen eventually. So we're just going to let it go. You know, like it is what it is. And thankfully, this man is being brought down now. A little bit after that, we get this moment with Aunt Este and Daisy. And Aunt Este just feels bad for not protecting her. She was the one that took her to the dentist. And, you know, she was a Pearl girl herself. She said she was the original Pearl girl. So I think she has some remorse from that. And we just really see her humanized, and even Daisy sees her, you know, humanized. She literally says that she realizes now, like, the ants are still human, right? So we get that kind of moment. But one thing I did want to kind of hone in on there is Daisy makes a comment about Aunt Este's eyes. And I saw some people online saying, oh my gosh, what if Aunt Este is Daisy's mom? Because they do both have blue eyes. But here's the thing. I don't think Mayday would lie to Daisy and say that her parents are dead. Unless this is going to be like one of those things where maybe they think her mom's dead, you know, or like both of her parents are dead and only one parent is dead. Just like in The Handmaid's Tale where June did not know that Luke was alive for so long. So this maybe is one of those situations. But I just don't know if Aunt Este would be Daisy's mom. I don't see that fitting in, but you never know. You know, things could just pop up. And I feel like the creators and writers are pretty good about putting little twists in here and there. So you just never know, but I just wanted to throw that in there because I'm seeing that a lot online and I just thought that was interesting. We get a lot of one-on-one confrontations and conversations this episode because right after this, or somewhere around here, this same time after she talks to Aunt Este, she then talks to Agnes. And Agnes kind of, I think, after her talk with Becca and after what happened in the dentist office, Agnes is kind of starting to be a little skeptical about Daisy. She questions her. She says she's not like the other Pearl girls. You know, all the other Pearl girls came here to get married and she seems reluctant to get married because of the whole menstruation thing. And she's kind of just like starting to see through Daisy's facade, and you can see Daisy getting kind of nervous, but Agnes can definitely tell something is off or different about Daisy. Before this conversation ends, we have this moment where Agnes and Daisy are still talking, and Daisy's like, I gotta go because I have cleaning duty or something. And then Agnes is like, aren't you, but you're a pro, or but you're a plum now, or something like that. And Daisy's like, I'm an experiment. Like, they don't know what to do with me, basically. And this just goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where Pearl girls don't normally reach menstruation. So they're not sure how this is going to work. Like, is she going to be an aunt? Is she going to be a wife? She's green. She got pinned. So my assumption is she's going to be a wife. Now, I think for Pearl girls who are not able to reach menstruation, they probably become aunts or something else, maybe Martha's. I'm not sure. But that is something I thought was interesting because we've heard it multiple times, like, right? A big reason Gilead was created is because they're cleaner. They're like trying to repopulate the world and doing all this stuff. So it makes sense that, you know, menstruation would come later for people not living in Gilead, but it just never clicked until this episode. Now, all of this stress between Becca, Daisy, Dr. Grove, everything, marriage is crushing down on Agnes, and we see her going through a literal panic attack. And this poor girl is going through it. I think she's just so lost and doesn't know what to do anymore. She's entering this stage of life where she's going to be married off and start a new life with this older, not somebody she doesn't want to marry. And she's just going through a lot, and we see that really come to a head this episode. We get some more of Commander Judd this episode when he and Aunt Lydia are trying to decide what they're going to do about Dr. Grove. We see Vidala in the room, and she's kind of trying to stick around, and they're like, no, we got this, get out. And I just thought that was so funny because it seemed like in the beginning of that episode, we had a moment with Aunt Lydia and Vidala, and they kind of were, you know, cordial. But this kind of, I think things keep coming up that really just push Vidala away and towards the edge and like really are going to get her to be kind of going against Aunt Lydia more and more. And this is one of those things. They just kind of kicked her out of the room and were like, we got this. We're going to talk about it ourselves. Like, we don't need you. Now, we see them have this conversation. They're talking about wanting to try and keep it quiet. Aunt Lydia does not want this to affect Becca's marriage. But Judd is kind of like, well, we just kind of need to get this over with, get this done, because the longer it takes, the more people are going to talk. And that is so true. But he makes another comment, He says, "What a pity. He was such a good dentist." And that pissed me off because like that just shows these girls are not valued. Like women are not valued in Gilead. And we knew that already, but little things like this really put that out in the open and just make you just like they hit you in the face. It's like, what the oh, how can you even say something like that? This guy literally was essaying young girls, and this is what you're thinking about. But I do think the fact that they talk about wanting to keep this quiet and wanting to have like a private salvaging for Dr. Grove kind of plays into what happens at the end and what I think will happen at the beginning of episode 10, the finale. So I'll get to that here in a second. Now, back at the Grove household, we see Becca, Garth, and Becca's mom there waiting for Dr. Grove to get home. And of course, he's late because we know what happened at the dental office that day. So they have no clue, apparently. And Dr. Grove shows up and he's kind of flustered. And Mrs. Grove goes to check on him. And Becca and Garth are left alone. This is the first time we see them kind of interact alone. I'm sure they have before, but this is like us visually getting to see them. And he's clearly, they're awkward, of course. And he's clearly trying to make her, calm down, like relax a little bit because of what's going on. She's obviously worried about her parents. And we see her laugh, like we see her smile a little bit. He's actually making her laugh. But that's bursted quickly because down comes Dr. Grove and they kind of go over everything and the accusations a little bit. And that's when Garth finds out about Daisy and the accusations she put against Dr. Grove. So he leaves the house and he's like, I gotta go, right? Because now he's panicked about Daisy. Like, what's going to happen to Daisy? What's happening with Daisy? And Mayday, their plans. So he's panicked and we don't see him again until at the school a little bit later, where he has a conversation with Daisy about the situation. And he finds out that Daisy has faked it, right? He's obviously pissed because he's like, Mayday did not tell you to do that. And then Daisy's like, Mayday hasn't told me to do anything, right? Like, she's like, I'm here to make a difference. I'm going to make a difference. I'm not just going to sit here and let him terrorize these girls. And good on her. Here too, I'm just not sure what's going on with Garth, but he is too soft, okay? Like, he is wanting to be against Gilead, but I'm not seeing enough umph coming from him. Like, he's not doing much to me. Maybe we'll see more, in the future seasons. But so far, not seeing enough to prove to me that he is for sure on Mayday's side because he hasn't really been doing much. So I guess we'll have to see how that plays out in the future. Backing up a little bit because this happened before the Garth and Daisy conversation, but we see all of the girls at the school the next day. Becca is pissed because of what Daisy is saying about her dad. And this right here, so like I said in the book, Becca has been essayed by her dad her whole life. But so far in the show, we have not seen anything that has shown that happened in the show. So I think in the show, maybe she has not been essayed by her dad because she seems to kind of be like defending him. So Becca kind of gets into it with Daisy in the hallway, more on Becca's side, and everybody's staring now. And Shu makes a comment, sketch us, it will last longer. And I just thought that was so funny. She was once again coming in with a comedic relief. Then the aunt comes down and everybody kind of disperses. But Becca and Agnes actually go outside and start talking. They're kind of going through everything. And Becca's like, you can't trust her. Like, this is what I told you. Like, this is what she does. And eventually Agnes just has to tell her, like, hey, she's not lying because your dad did it to me. And that completely breaks Becca because Becca is in love with Agnes. Becca wants to be with Agnes, but of course she can't. So this hurts her. Like, that really cuts Becca deep. She is pissed. Now the aunt comes out and breaks them up. So that's all we get of that for now. But this is really a catalyst into the rest of the episode and what drives Becca off the deep end. All right, now we get into the end of the episode. Now, the end of the episode, I was in tears. I was crying. This is one of the saddest episodes I've seen in a while. I don't remember a time I cried like this in The Handmaid's Tale. Like, it was so sad. And I don't know if it's because these are younger girls or what, but it was just, my heart broke for Becca. So as I explained before in the book, Dr. Grove is actually taken down by Aunt Elizabeth. And that is facilitated by Aunt Lydia, who plants these bugs and kind of hears Becca over talking the essay her dad did to her. And that's how he's taken down by particution in the book. Another thing that happens in the book is Becca attempts to unalive herself because she does not want to get married because of everything she's gone through her whole life with her dad. It's unsuccessful, and Aunt Lydia has her become an aunt. So that's a little bit of the differences from the book. I believe I've already said that a couple times, but I feel like that's important to reiterate here because the way the show goes this episode is Becca actually tries to unalive, or does unalive her dad. And I was so happy with the way they did this. I would rather her do this than her try to unalive herself. Now, I don't know if we'll get that further on down the line, because one thing about the book is in the book, Agnes also becomes an aunt. And in the book, Aunt Lydia has these little devices everywhere. She's collecting dirt on Gilead so that way she can send them back to Canada to kind of help take down Gilead. So in the book, Agnes and Becca are aunts, and they all help each other, right? So Aunt Lydia tries to get Nicole, because in the book, Nicole is in Gilead at the school. They basically facilitate this plan for Becca to be a distraction, and Agnes and Nicole escape Gilead. Now, in the book, like I said, she attempts to unalive herself once, and then towards the end of the book, in order to help them escape, she actually ends up unaliving herself. I don't know if further down the line we'll get that same kind of scenario play out maybe in future seasons. They're not following the book, so that could never happen. I am not really sure. We'll just have to see how that goes, but I know as far as the book, that's how it went. But I really, like I said, I loved that they didn't have her do that now, because I thought the way they played it out worked really well, because I have a theory about what they may do to get her out of being in trouble. But I'll go over that theory at the end of the episode. So after Becca unalives her dad, she's clearly in a state of shock, and she dresses up as a Martha and gets on the bus. And at first, I thought she was going to pull a move like June and Moira did when Moira escaped Gilead. And I thought she was going to take a ticket out, like she was going to go. But that didn't end up happening. We see her end up at Agnes's house, or the Mackenzie's house. And that is like not a place I expected her to go, but I also think like she wouldn't have the knowledge to know how to escape because she's been in Gilead her whole life. And this is where it gets super heartbreaking, because we see the Martha wake up Agnes, and she sees Becca. Becca opens her cloak. She's full of blood, and Agnes is clearly shocked, like, what is going on? She's unsure. And that's when Becca says, "He can't hurt you anymore." And that was just such a sad moment. Like, she cares so much for Agnes. She did this because of Agnes, and she wanted to protect her, and she made sure that that problem was going to be solved. And so Agnes, tries to comfort her, I think she's literally trying to figure out what to do, because she's so naive. How would she know how to handle this type of situation? She, helps her get clean. They get her new clothes. And at some point she tells her parents. She thinks her parents are going to help get Becca to the doctor, but that doesn't end up being the case. We hear a knock at the door, and it's Garth. And for a second there, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, thank God. Garth is here. He's Mayday. He's going to help her escape, right? And for a second there, I'm like, is Commander Mackenzie Mayday? Because I thought him and Garth were going to kind of team up and help her escape somewhere. But that did not happen. I wish that would have happened, but it did not. So we see them walking outside, and then we see this flock of eyes come out. And the first thing I could think of was they reminded me of the Dementors from Harry Potter. Like, that's what they looked like. I've seen eyes plenty of times in The Handmaid's Tale. They have never looked this terrifying. I don't know what they did differently to these eyes, but they're just more scary. I saw a lot of people saying the eyes were women. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I went back and watched that specific part multiple times. And I also went and looked at other pictures of the eyes from The Handmaid's Tale. And they're all dressed differently each time, but a lot of people were pointing out that they had like dresses on, but I don't think what we were seeing were dresses. I'm going to put some pictures up on the video. So if you're listening through Spotify or Apple Music or something, go to the YouTube video and you'll be able to see the pictures I'm going to put up. But there's a couple different of eye uniforms that I've seen, and some of them have like this cape. They're wearing capes. Some of them are just wearing like army uniforms. Some of them have like masks, or some of them have those bags over their heads, which is what we saw. So I think what people were mistaking for breasts in this, because I think that's what was getting people, were actually like their bulletproof vests. I don't think that they were women, because I don't think they would be bold enough to show up right in front of Commander McKenzie's house unless Commander McKenzie was actually somehow a part of Mayday, but that would not make sense because the whole time in The Handmaid's Tale, Commander McKenzie has known that June was trying to get Agnes, and that just wouldn't make sense to me if he was fighting her the whole time, but somehow now on Mayday's side, that just does not make sense to me unless he had a change of heart. So I don't think those were Mayday. I think those were definitely just regular eyes. This is future me. I just wanted to jump in because as I was editing this video, I went back and I slowed down the scene where the eyes come out and as they're putting Becca in the truck. And I now think these are women. Like, they just look like women now. The shape, they are in fact wearing dresses. And come to think about it, they have cattle prods. I don't think I've ever seen the men with cattle prods because the men have guns. So I'm going to leave in what I just said, but future me, after looking into it, now thinks they definitely are women. Most likely the aunts. As we see them putting Becca away into this box truck, essentially, you just see the freaking cattle prods flowing around on the eyes, and freaking Becca is just screaming out for Agnes, and that just broke my heart even more. I kid you not, like the whole ending when Becca got to Agnes's house, I just knew something bad was going to happen. Her parents just weren't going to help out the way we would hope they would. And I knew it was going to end up in this type of situation. And then we're left on the cliffhanger of Becca, what's going to happen to Becca? Or unalived. And the reason we know that is because we get 2 scenes of Becca where she's in a wedding dress. We get one scene from the last episode where she's in Agnes's dream sequence. And then we get another scene of Becca in a wedding dress at her wedding. And how we know the difference, or how I'm guessing we know the difference, is just my interpretation. But the dream sequence, if you look at the cinematography and the coloring, it was more purple. It was very dark. You could tell it was like a dream. But the trailer version of Becca in the wedding dress, it's much clearer. It's much more color graded like the rest of the season has been. So I think we know that Becca is going to survive. She will end up getting married to Garth. But the question is now, how is she going to get out of this situation, and what happens after she is taken by the eyes? I'm going to read the description for episode 10. It says, while Becca faces the consequences of her actions, Agnes and Daisy must decide how far they're willing to go to protect her. So obviously Daisy and Agnes are going to be involved in that to the extent I'm not sure, because I don't really know they don't have much power, so what can they do? My assumption was at first that Aunt Lydia and Commander Judd wanted to keep the Dr. Grove situation quiet, right? And we've seen Gilead cover up stuff before. With the Waterford, so much stuff went on in that household that they covered up. So I would think maybe they're going to play off Dr. Grove's situation as like an attack from Mayday, right? Somebody went in there to try and take him down, and they're going to shift the blame away from Becca, which is why she gets out and gets to marry Garth. I saw a lot of people saying that Becca could become a handmaid. I don't think that's going to happen. One, because we already have a picture of her in the wedding dress, like I said earlier, at the wedding with Garth. And 2, I don't think they would go that direction. I just don't think they would do that to Becca. And if I know they're not following closely to the book, but if they're trying to even tiptoe around the book, that just doesn't happen in the book. So I don't know. My personal opinion, they're going to play it off in some way, and then they're just going to get right back on track. But I am curious to see what part Agnes and Daisy play in that. All right, that's it for this episode. Thank you guys for always watching, listening, wherever you watch and listen. I appreciate it so much. And if you have opinions, or I want to know your thoughts for what you think is going to happen with Becca. So find me on social media, find me on YouTube, comment down, or comment on Spotify. I will look at those too. And let me know what you think is going to happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I look forward to the season finale next week, episode 10. I can't believe it's already ending. It's not enough. These episodes have been so short. That episode, I think, is 58 minutes long. So hopefully we'll get a lot more, and we'll get some answers and closure to certain things. For sure, we'll know what happens with Becca. So we'll get that at least. But yeah, I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts. Thank you guys for listening. And as always, blessed be the fight.